Hi, today we're going to do some examples that demonstrate how finding the number of zeros can help you solve a problem. So some of these problems are a little bit, let's call them fake, like they wouldn't occur in the real world, like example 1. It's just a chance for you to use your problem solving skills. And then example 2 shows you something that's a bit more realistic. So you need to be able to know how to do both of these for a test or exam. So let's recall how you actually find the number of zeros. If it's in factored form, you can see what the zeros are right there, so you already know what the number of zeros are. But in standard form and vertex form, you have to do a little bit more work. So if the equation is in standard form, you should use the discriminant. Okay, so the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. Remember, that's what's underneath the square root in the quadratic formula. So if this is greater than 0, that means that there are 2 zeros. Okay, since plus or minus what's under that square root would give you 2 different answers. If b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, that means there is 1 zero. And if b squared minus 4ac is less than 0, that means there are none. Okay? Remember, zeros is just another way of saying x-intercepts. If it's in vertex form, you look at the vertex or the direction of opening. So visualize where the vertex is, and then if the parabola opens up or down. So for instance, if the y value is above 0, okay, and then it opens up, you can visualize that there's no zeros. But if it opens down, you can visualize that there are 2 zeros. The same can be said for below. If it opens up, there are 2, and down there are none. But what would have to be true for there to be only 1 zero? Well, the y value of the vertex would have to be equal to 0. The vertex would have to be on the x-axis. Okay, that's just a little refresher. So for example 1, for what values of k, here's a k, will this equation have 2 zeros, 1 zero, or no zeros? Rather, sorry, this is an expression, not an equation. Well, the first thing you should do is think, hey, this is in standard form, so I need to use the discriminant. So remember, the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. So here is your a value, it equals 3. Here is your b value, it equals 4. And your c value is actually equal to k. So let's set this up. B squared is 4 squared minus 4 times 3 times k. And let's do part A here. So that for there to be 2 zeros, this would have to be greater than 0. So we just have to solve this inequality. So this turns into 16 minus 12k is greater than 0. And you can just move this to the other side just as you would an equality. So 16 greater than 12k. Divide both sides by 12. You get k is greater than 4/3. Okay? I'm sorry, k, let me erase that. Divide both sides by 12, so that reduces to 4/3, and then you keep the sign this way. So 4/3 greater than k, which can be rewritten as k is less than 4/3. There you go. So that is what has to be true in order for this expression to have 2 zeros. You can have k be any value as long as it's less than 4/3. Okay, so how will you pause the video and, using this information, solve B and C? Really, you just go through the same process, but in this case, you would have b squared minus 4ac equaling 0 for it to be 1 zero. So this would end up being 16 minus 12k equals 0. So k would be equal to 4/3, there to be 1 zero. And going through the same process, b squared minus 4ac less than 0. You would have 16 minus 12k less than 0. So k in this case would have to be greater than 4/3 once you move this over and rearrange. So again, in this case, we used the discriminant because it was in standard form. So anytime you see standard form, number of zeros, think discriminant. That's something that you might just have to memorize. Okay, example 2 is a bit more of a realistic example. So a company has profits that follow this quadratic formula, and this quadratic equation. And X is the number of units sold in thousands. So think, that means if X is 1, then that would be 1,000 units. If X is 2, that would be 2,000 units. So how many ways are there for a company to break even? So remember, break even means profits equals 0. That's what break even means. So it means you don't need to take in any money. So basically this is saying, A is asking us how many zeros are there. Because it's asking how many ways are there for this equation to equal 0. So again, recognize what form it's in. Standard form. That means we use the discriminant. So b squared minus 4ac is equal to, b is 35, so 35 squared minus 4 times negative 5, make sure you include that negative as part of the a value, times c, which is negative 30. So this is 625. So since 625 is greater than 0, so therefore b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0. So therefore there are 2 ways to break even. Okay, then it's asking what amount do they sell to break even. So now it wants us to find the values of x that satisfy this. So this is basically asking us to solve minus 5x squared plus 35x minus 30 equals 0. So find the values of x for which this equation is true. So the profit is 0. So to solve a quadratic, remember you can factor or use quadratic formula. Now this actually isn't too bad to factor because there's a common factor that you can take out of